Ireland is an island in the North Atlantic Ocean, in northwestern Europe. It is separated from Great Britain to its east by the North Channel, the Irish Sea, and St. George's Channel. Ireland is the second largest island of the British Isles, the third largest in Europe, and the 20th largest in the world. Geopolitically, the island is divided between the Republic of Ireland, officially named Ireland, a sovereign state covering 5/6 of the island, and Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom. As of 2022, the population of the entire island is just over 7 million, with 5.1 million in the Republic of Ireland and 1.9 million in Northern Ireland, ranking it the second most populous island in Europe after Great Britain. The geography of Ireland comprises relatively low-lying mountains surrounding a central plain, with several navigable rivers extending inland. Its lush vegetation is a product of its mild but changeable climate, which is free of extremes in temperature. Much of Ireland was woodland until the end of the Middle Ages. Today, woodland makes up about 10% of the island, compared with a European average of over 33%, with most of it being non-native conifer plantations. The Irish climate is influenced by the Atlantic Ocean and thus very moderate, and winters are milder than expected for such a northerly area, although summers are cooler than those in continental Europe. Rainfall and cloud cover are abundant. Gaelic Ireland had emerged by the 1st century AD. The island was Christianized from the 5th century onwards. During this period, Ireland was divided into many petty kingships under provincial kingships, Suaga fifth of the traditional provinces, vying for dominance and the title of High King of Ireland. In the late 8th century to early 11th century AD, Viking raids and settlement took place, culminating in the Battle of Clontarf on the 23rd of April, 1014, which resulted in the ending of Viking power in Ireland. Following the 12th century Anglo-Norman invasion, England claimed sovereignty. However, English rule did not extend over the whole island until the 16th to 17th century Tudor conquest, which led to colonization by settlers from Britain. In the 1690s, a system of Protestant English rule was designed to materially disadvantage the Catholic majority and Protestant dissenters, and was extended during the 18th century. With the Acts of Union in 1801, Ireland became a part of the United Kingdom. A war of independence in the early 20th century was followed by the partition of the island, leading to the creation of the Irish Free State, which became increasingly sovereign over the following decades until it declared a republic in 1948, Republic of Ireland Act, 1948, and Northern Ireland, which remained a part of the United Kingdom. Northern Ireland saw much civil unrest from the late 1960s until the 1990s. This subsided following the Good Friday Agreement in 1998. In 1973, both the Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom, with Northern Ireland as part of it, joined the European Economic Community. Following a referendum vote in 2016, the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland included, left the European Union (EU) in 2020. Northern Ireland was granted a limited special status and allowed to operate within the EU single market for goods without being in the European Union. Irish culture has had a significant influence on other cultures, especially in the field of literature. Alongside mainstream Western culture, a strong indigenous culture exists, as expressed through Gaelic games, Irish music, Irish language, and Irish dance. The island's culture shares many features with that of Great Britain, including the English language, and sports such as association football, rugby, horse racing, golf, and boxing. Ireland is located in the northwest of Europe, between latitudes 51 degrees and 56 degrees north, and longitudes 11 degrees and 5 degrees west. It is separated from Great Britain by the Irish Sea and the North Channel, which has a width of 23 kilometers at its narrowest point. To the west is the Northern Atlantic Ocean, and to the south is the Celtic Sea, which lies between Ireland and Brittany, in France. Ireland has a total area of 84,421 kilometers square, of which the Republic of Ireland occupies 83%. Ireland and Great Britain, together with many nearby smaller islands, are known collectively as the British Isles. As the term British Isles can be controversial in relation to Ireland, the alternate term Britain and Ireland is sometimes used as a neutral term for the islands. A ring of coastal mountains surrounds low plains at the centre of the island. The highest of these is Carron Hill, Irish, Carran Twaithil, in County Kerry, which rises to 1,039 metres above sea level. The most arable land lies in the province of Leinster. Western areas are mainly mountainous and rocky with green panoramic vistas. River Shannon, the island's longest river at 360.5 kilometers long, rises in County Cavan in the northwest and flows through Limerick in the midwest. The island's lush vegetation, a product of its mild climate and frequent rainfall, earns it the sobriquet the Emerald Isle. Overall, Ireland has a mild but changeable oceanic climate with few extremes. The climate is typically insular and temperate, avoiding the extremes in temperature of many other areas in the world at similar latitudes. This is a result of the moist winds which ordinarily prevail from the southwestern Atlantic. Precipitation falls throughout the year but is light overall, particularly in the east. The west tends to be wetter on average and prone to Atlantic storms, especially in the late autumn and winter months. These occasionally bring destructive winds and higher total rainfall to these areas, as well as sometimes snow and hail. The regions of North County Galway and East County Mayo have the highest incidence of recorded lightning annually for the island, with lightning occurring approximately 5 to 10 days per year in these areas. Munster, in the south, records the least snow, whereas Ulster, in the north, records the most. Inland areas are warmer in summer and colder in winter. Usually around 40 days of the year are below freezing 0 degrees Celsius at inland weather stations, compared to 10 days at coastal stations. Ireland is sometimes affected by heat waves, most recently in 1995, 2003, 2006, 2013 and 2018. In common with the rest of Europe, Ireland experienced unusually cold weather during the winter of 2010 to 2011. Temperatures fell as low as -17.2 degrees Celsius in County Mayo on the 20th of December and up to a metre of snow fell in mountainous areas. Unlike Great Britain, which had a land bridge with mainland Europe, Ireland only had an ice bridge ending around 14,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age, and as a result, it has fewer land animal and plant species than Great Britain or mainland Europe. There are 55 mammal species in Ireland, and of them, only 26 land mammal species are considered native to Ireland. Some species, such as the red fox, hedgehog and badger, are very common, whereas others, like the Irish hare, red deer and pine marten, are less so. Aquatic wildlife, such as species of sea turtle, shark, seal, whale and dolphin, are common off the coast. About 400 species of birds have been recorded in Ireland. Many of these are migratory, including the barn swallow. Several different habitat types are found in Ireland, including farmland, open woodland, temperate broadleaf and mixed forests, conifer plantations, peat bogs and a variety of coastal habitats. However, agriculture drives current land use patterns in Ireland, limiting natural habitat preserves, particularly for larger wild mammals with greater territorial needs. With no large apex predators in Ireland other than humans and dogs, such populations of animals as semi-wild deer that cannot be controlled by smaller predators, such as the fox, are controlled by annual culling. There are no snakes in Ireland, and only one species of reptile, the common lizard, is native to the island. Extinct species include the Irish elk, the great auk, brown bear and the wolf. Some previously extinct birds, such as the golden eagle, have been reintroduced after decades of extirpation. Ireland is now one of the least forested countries in Europe. Until the end of the Middle Ages, Ireland was heavily forested. Native species include deciduous trees such as oak, ash, hazel, birch, alder, willow, aspen, rowan and hawthorn, as well as evergreen trees such Scots pine, yew, holly and strawberry trees. Only about 10% of Ireland today is woodland. Most of this is non-native conifer plantations, and only 2% is native woodland. The average woodland cover of European countries is over 33%, 12, in the Republic, about 3,893.56 kilometers square is owned by the state, mainly by the Forestry Service Coilt. Remnants of native forest can be found scattered around the island, in particular in the Killarney National Park. Much of the land is now covered with pasture and there are many species of wildflower. Gorse, Ulex europaeus, a wild furze, is commonly found growing in the uplands, and ferns are plentiful in the more moist regions, especially in the western parts. It is home to hundreds of plant species, some of them unique to the island, and has been invaded by some grasses, such as Spartina anglica. The algal and seaweed flora is that of the cold temperate variety. The total number of species is 574, 138. The island has been invaded by some algae, some of which are now well established. Because of its mild climate, many species, including subtropical species such as palm trees, are grown in Ireland. Phytogeographically, Ireland belongs to the Atlantic European province of the Circumboreal region within the Boreal Kingdom. The island can be subdivided into two ecoregions, the Celtic broadleaf forests and North Atlantic moist mixed forests. The population of Ireland is just over 7 million, of which approximately 5.2 million reside in the Republic of Ireland and 1.9 million reside in Northern Ireland. People have lived in Ireland for over 9,000 years. Many survived into late medieval times, others vanished as they became politically unimportant. Over the past 1,200 years, Vikings, Normans, Welsh, Flemings, Scots, English, Africans, and Eastern Europeans have all added to the population and have had significant influences on Irish culture. The population of Ireland rose rapidly from the 16th century until the mid-19th century, interrupted briefly by the famine of 1740–41, which killed roughly 2/5 of the island's population. The population rebounded and multiplied over the next century, but the Great Famine of the 1840s caused 1 million deaths and forced over 1 million more to emigrate in its immediate wake. Over the following century, the population was reduced by over half, at a time when the general trend in European countries was for populations to rise by an average of threefold. Ireland's largest religious group is Christianity. The largest denomination is Roman Catholicism, representing over 73% of the island and about 87% of the Republic of Ireland. Most of the rest of the population adhere to one of the various Protestant denominations, about 48% of Northern Ireland. The largest is the Anglican Church of Ireland. The Muslim community is growing in Ireland, mostly through increased immigration, with a 50% increase in the Republic between the 2006 and 2011 census. The island has a small Jewish community. About 4% of the Republic's population and about 14% of the Northern Ireland population describe themselves as of no religion. In a 2010 survey conducted on behalf of the Irish Times, 32% of respondents said they went to a religious service more than once per week. The population of Ireland collapsed dramatically during the second half of the 19th century. A population of over 8 million in 1841 was reduced to slightly over 4 million by 1921. In part, the fall in population was caused by death from the Great Famine of 1845 to 1852, which took roughly 1 million lives. The remaining decline of around 3 million was due to the entrenched culture of emigration caused by the dire economic state of the country, lasting until the late 20th century. Emigration from Ireland in the 19th century contributed to the populations of England, the United States, Canada, and Australia, in all of which a large Irish diaspora lives. As of 2006, 4.3 million Canadians, or 14% of the population, were of Irish descent, while around one-third of the Australian population had an element of Irish descent, 153. As of 2013, there were 40 million Irish Americans and 33 million Americans who claimed Irish ancestry. With growing prosperity since the last decade of the 20th century, Ireland became a destination for immigrants. Since the European Union expanded to include Poland in 2004, Polish people have comprised the largest number of immigrants, over 150,000, from Central Europe. There has also been significant immigration from Lithuania, Czech Republic, and Latvia. The Republic of Ireland in particular has seen large-scale immigration, with 420,000 foreign nationals as of 2006, about 10% of the population. Nearly a quarter of births, 24%, in 2009 were to mothers born outside of Ireland. Up to 50,000 Eastern and Central European migrant workers left Ireland in response to the Irish financial crisis. The two official languages of the Republic of Ireland are Irish and English. Each language has produced noteworthy literature. Irish, though now only the language of a minority, was the vernacular of the Irish people for thousands of years and was possibly introduced during the Iron Age. It began to be written down after Christianization in the 5th century and spread to Scotland and the Isle of Man, where it evolved into the Scottish Gaelic and Manx languages, respectively. Ireland's culture comprises elements of the culture of ancient peoples, later immigrant and broadcast cultural influences, chiefly Gaelic culture, Anglicization, Americanization, and aspects of broader European culture. In broad terms, Ireland is regarded as one of the Celtic nations of Europe, alongside Scotland, Wales, Cornwall, Isle of Man and Brittany. This combination of cultural influences is visible in the intricate designs termed Irish interlace or Celtic knotwork. These can be seen in the ornamentation of medieval religious and secular works. The style is still popular today in jewelry and graphic art, as is the distinctive style of traditional Irish music and dance, and has become indicative of modern Celtic culture in general. Religion has played a significant role in the cultural life of the island since ancient times, and since the 17th century plantations, has been the focus of political identity and divisions on the island. Ireland's pre-Christian heritage fused with the Celtic Church following the missions of St. Patrick in the 5th century. The Hiberno-Scottish missions, begun by the Irish monk St. Columba, spread the Irish vision of Christianity to pagan England and the Frankish Empire. These missions brought written language to an illiterate population of Europe during the Dark Ages that followed the fall of Rome, earning Ireland the sobriquet, the Island of Saints and Scholars. Since the 20th century, Irish pubs worldwide have become outposts of Irish culture, especially those with a full range of cultural and gastronomic offerings. The Irish philosopher and theologian Johannes Scotus Eriugena was considered one of the leading intellectuals of the early Middle Ages. Sir Ernest Henry Shackleton, an Irish explorer, was one of the principal figures of Antarctic exploration. He, along with his expedition, made the first ascent of Mount Erebus and the discovery of the approximate location of the South Magnetic Pole. Robert Boyle was a 17th century natural philosopher, chemist, physicist, inventor, and early gentleman scientist. He is largely regarded as one of the founders of modern chemistry and is best known for the formulation of Boyle's law. 19th century physicist, John Tyndall, discovered the Tyndall effect. Father Nicholas Joseph Callan, professor of natural philosophy in Maynooth College, is best known for his invention of the induction coil, transformer, and he discovered an early method of galvanization in the 19th century. Other notable Irish physicists include Ernest Walton, winner of the 1951 Nobel Prize in Physics. With Sir John Douglas Cockcroft, he was the first to split the nucleus of the atom by artificial means and made contributions to the development of a new theory of wave equation. William Thomson, or Lord Kelvin, is the person whom the absolute temperature unit, the Kelvin, is named after. Sir Joseph Larmor, a physicist and mathematician, made innovations in the understanding of electricity, dynamics, thermodynamics, and the electron theory of matter. His most influential work was Ether and Matter, a book on theoretical physics published in 1900. There are 2 World Heritage Sites on the island, the Brú na Boyne Complex and the Giant's Causeway, 236. Several other places are on the tentative list, for example the Burren, the Seedy Fields and Mount Stewart. Some of the most visited sites in Ireland include Bunratty Castle, the Rock of Cashel, the Cliffs of Moher, Holy Cross Abbey and Blarney Castle. Historically important monastic sites include Glendalough and Clonmacnoise, which are maintained as national monuments in the Republic of Ireland. The Dublin region receives the most tourists, 239, and is home to several of the most popular attractions such as the Guinness Storehouse and Book of Kells. The west and southwest, which includes the lakes of Killarney and the Dingle Peninsula in County Kerry and Kenmare and the Aran Islands in County Galway, are also popular tourist destinations. Stately homes, built during the 17th, 18th and 19th centuries in Palladian, neoclassical and neo-Gothic styles, such as Castle Ward, Castletown House, Bantry House, Strokestown Park and Glenveigh Castle are also of interest to tourists. Some have been converted into hotels, such as Ashford Castle, Castle Leslie and Dromoland Castle. Food and cuisine in Ireland take their influence from the crops grown and animals farmed in the island's temperate climate and from the social and political circumstances of Irish history. For example, whilst from the Middle Ages until the arrival of the potato in the 16th century the dominant feature of the Irish economy was the herding of cattle, the number of cattle a person owned was equated to their social standing. Thus herders would avoid slaughtering a milk-producing cow. For this reason, pork and white meat were more common than beef, and thick fatty strips of salted bacon, known as rashers, and the eating of salted butter, a dairy product rather than beef itself, have been a central feature of the diet in Ireland since the Middle Ages. The practice of bleeding cattle and mixing the blood with milk and butter, not unlike the practice of the Maasai, was common, and black pudding, made from blood, grain, usually barley, and seasoning, remains a breakfast staple in Ireland. All of these influences can be seen today in the phenomenon of the breakfast roll. The introduction of the potato in the second half of the 16th century heavily influenced cuisine thereafter. Great poverty encouraged a subsistence approach to food, and by the mid-19th century, the vast majority of the population sufficed with a diet of potatoes and milk. A typical family, consisting of a man, a woman, and 4 children, would eat 18 stone, 110 kilograms, of potatoes per week. Consequently, dishes that are considered as national dishes represent a fundamental simplicity to cooking, such as the Irish stew, bacon and cabbage, boxty, a type of potato pancake, or calcannon, a dish of mashed potatoes and kale or cabbage. Since the last quarter of the 20th century, with a re-emergence of wealth in Ireland, a new Irish cuisine based on traditional ingredients incorporating international influence has emerged. This cuisine is based on fresh vegetables, fish, especially salmon, trout, oysters, mussels, and other shellfish, as well as traditional soda breads and the wide range of handmade cheeses that are now being produced across the country. An example of this new cuisine is Dublin lawyer, lobster cooked in whiskey and cream. The potato remains, however, a fundamental feature of this cuisine, and the Irish remain the highest per capita consumers of potatoes in Europe. Traditional regional foods can be found throughout the country, for example coddle in Dublin or drisheen in Cork, both a type of sausage, or blawer, a doughy white bread particular to Waterford. Ireland once dominated the world's market for whiskey, producing 90% of the world's whiskey at the start of the 20th century. However, as a consequence of bootleggers during the Prohibition in the United States, who sold poor-quality whiskey bearing Irish-sounding names, thus eroding the pre-Prohibition popularity for Irish brands, and tariffs on Irish whiskey across the British Empire during the Anglo-Irish Trade War of the 1930s, sales of Irish whiskey worldwide fell to a mere 2% by the mid-20th century. In 1953, an Irish government survey found that 50% of whiskey drinkers in the United States had never heard of Irish whiskey. Irish whiskey, as researched in 2009 by the CNBC American broadcaster, remains popular domestically and has grown in international sales steadily over a few decades. Typically, CNBC states Irish whiskey is not as smoky as a Scotch whiskey, but not as sweet as American or Canadian whiskies. Whiskey forms the basis of cream liqueurs, such as Baileys, and the Irish coffee, a cocktail of coffee and whiskey reputedly invented at Foynes Flying Boat Station, is probably the best-known Irish cocktail. Stout, a kind of porter beer, particularly Guinness, is typically associated with Ireland, although historically it was more closely associated with London. Porter remains very popular, although it has lost sales since the mid-20th century to lager. Cider, particularly Magners, marketed in the Republic of Ireland as Bulmers, is also a popular drink. Red lemonade, a soft drink, is consumed on its own and as a mixer, particularly with whiskey. During the last glacial period, and until about 16,000 BC, much of Ireland was periodically covered in ice. 18. The relative sea level was less than 50 m lower, resulting in an ice bridge, but not a land bridge, forming between Ireland and Great Britain. By 14,000 BC this ice bridge existed only between Northern Ireland and Scotland, and by 12,000 BC Ireland was completely separated from Great Britain. 20. Later, around 6,100 BC, Great Britain became separated from continental Europe. Until recently, the earliest evidence of human activity in Ireland was dated at 12,500 years ago, demonstrated by a butchered bear bone found in a cave in County Clare. Since 2021, the earliest evidence of human activity in Ireland is dated to 33,000 years ago. By about 8,000 BC, more sustained occupation of the island has been shown, with evidence for Mesolithic communities around the island. Sometime before 4000 BC, Neolithic settlers introduced cereal cultivars, domesticated animals such as cattle and sheep, built large timber buildings, and stone monuments. The earliest evidence for farming in Ireland or Great Britain is from Fairwriter's Cove, County Kerry, where a flint knife, cattle bones, and a sheep's tooth were carbon dated to c. 4350 BC. Field systems were developed in different parts of Ireland, including at the Seedy Fields, that has been preserved beneath a blanket of peat in present-day Tiroli. An extensive field system, arguably the oldest in the world, 27, consisted of small divisions separated by dry stone walls. The fields were farmed for several centuries between 3500 BC and 3000 BC. Wheat and barley were the principal crops. The Bronze Age began around 2500 BC, with technology changing people's everyday lives during this period through innovations such as the wheel, harnessing oxen, weaving textiles, brewing alcohol and metalworking, which produced new weapons and tools, along with fine gold decoration and jewelry, such as brooches and torques. As a direct result of the 1798 rebellion in its aftermath in 1800, the British and Irish parliaments both passed Acts of Union that, with effect from the 1st of January, 1801, merged the Kingdom of Ireland and the Kingdom of Great Britain to create a United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. The passage of the Act in the Irish Parliament was ultimately achieved with substantial majorities, having failed on the first attempt in 1799. According to contemporary documents and historical analysis, this was achieved through a considerable degree of bribery, with funding provided by the British Secret Service Office, and the awarding of peerages, places, and honours to secure votes. Thus, the Parliament in Ireland was abolished and replaced by a united Parliament at Westminster in London, though resistance remained, as evidenced by Robert Emmet's failed Irish Rebellion of 1803. Aside from the development of the linen industry, Ireland was largely passed over by the Industrial Revolution, partly because it lacked coal and iron resources and partly because of the impact of the sudden union with the structurally superior economy of England, which saw Ireland as a source of agricultural produce and capital. The Great Famine of 1845 to 1851 devastated Ireland, as in those years Ireland's population fell by 1/3. More than 1 million people died from starvation and disease, with an additional million people emigrating during the famine, mostly to the United States and Canada. In the century that followed, an economic depression caused by the famine resulted in a further million people emigrating. By the end of the decade, half of all immigration to the United States was from Ireland. The period of civil unrest that followed until the end of the 19th century is referred to as the Land War. Mass emigration became deeply entrenched and the population continued to decline until the mid-20th century. Immediately prior to the famine, the population was recorded as 8.2 million by the 1841 census. The population has never returned to this level since. The population continued to fall until 1961. County Leitrim was the final Irish county to record a population increase post-famine, in 2006. The 19th and early 20th centuries saw the rise of modern Irish nationalism, primarily among the Roman Catholic population. The preeminent Irish political figure after the Union was Daniel O'Connell. He was elected as Member of Parliament for Ennis in a surprise result and despite being unable to take his seat as a Roman Catholic. O'Connell spearheaded a vigorous campaign that was taken up by the Prime Minister, the Irish-born soldier and statesman, the Duke of Wellington. Steering the Catholic Relief Bill through Parliament, aided by future Prime Minister Robert Peel, Wellington prevailed upon a reluctant George IV to sign the bill and proclaim it into law. George's father had opposed the plan of the earlier Prime Minister, Pitt the Younger, to introduce such a bill following the Union of 1801, fearing Catholic emancipation to be in conflict with the Act of Settlement 1701. Daniel O'Connell led a subsequent campaign for the repeal of the Act of Union, which failed. Later in the century, Charles Stewart Parnell and others campaigned for autonomy within the Union, or Home Rule. Unionists, especially those located in Ulster, were strongly opposed to Home Rule, which they thought would be dominated by Catholic interests. 85. After several attempts to pass a Home Rule bill through Parliament, it looked certain that one would finally pass in 1914. To prevent this from happening, the Ulster Volunteers were formed in 1913 under the leadership of Edward Carson. Their formation was followed in 1914 by the establishment of the Irish Volunteers, whose aim was to ensure that the Home Rule Bill was passed. The Act was passed, but with the temporary exclusion of the 6 counties of Ulster, which later became Northern Ireland. Before it could be implemented, however, the Act was suspended for the duration of the First World War. The Irish Volunteers split into 2 groups. The majority, approximately 175,000 in number, under John Redmond, took the name National Volunteers and supported Irish involvement in the war. A minority, approximately 13,000, retained the Irish Volunteers name and opposed Ireland's involvement in the war. The Easter Rising of 1916 was carried out by the latter group together with a smaller socialist militia, the Irish Citizen Army. The British response, executing 15 leaders of the rising over a period of 10 days and imprisoning or interning more than 1,000 people, turned the mood of the country in favour of the rebels. Support for Irish republicanism increased further due to the ongoing war in Europe, as well as the conscription crisis of 1918. The pro-independence Republican Party, Sinn Féin, received overwhelming endorsement in the general election of 1918, and in 1919 proclaimed an Irish Republic, setting up its own parliament, Dáil Éireann, and government. Simultaneously, the Volunteers, which became known as the Irish Republican Army, IRA, launched a 3-year guerrilla war, which ended in a truce in July 1921, although violence continued until June 1922, mostly in Northern Ireland. In December 1921, the Anglo-Irish Treaty was concluded between the British government and representatives of the Second Dáil. It gave Ireland complete independence in its home affairs and practical independence for foreign policy, but an opt-out clause allowed Northern Ireland to remain within the United Kingdom, which it immediately exercised. Additionally, members of the Free State Parliament were required to swear an oath of allegiance to the Constitution of the Irish Free State and make a statement of faithfulness to the King. 88. Disagreements over these provisions led to a split in the nationalist movement and a subsequent Irish Civil War between the new government of the Irish Free State and those opposed to the treaty, led by Eamon de Valera. The Civil War officially ended in May 1923 when de Valera issued a ceasefire order. During its first decade, the newly formed Irish Free State was governed by the victors of the Civil War. When de Valera achieved power, he took advantage of the Statute of Westminster and political circumstances to build upon inroads to greater sovereignty made by the previous government. The oath was abolished, and in 1937 a new constitution was adopted. This completed a process of gradual separation from the British Empire that governments had pursued since independence. However, it was not until 1949 that the state was declared, officially, to be the Republic of Ireland. The state was neutral during World War II, but offered clandestine assistance to the Allies, particularly in the potential defence of Northern Ireland. Despite their country's neutrality, approximately 50,000 volunteers from independent Ireland joined the British forces during the war, for being awarded Victoria Crosses. The German intelligence was also active in Ireland. 91. Its operations ended in September 1941 when police made arrests based on surveillance carried out on the key diplomatic legations in Dublin. To the authorities, counterintelligence was a fundamental line of defense. With a regular army of only slightly over 7,000 men at the start of the war, and with limited supplies of modern weapons, the state would have had great difficulty in defending itself from invasion from either side in the conflict. Large-scale emigration marked most of the post-WWI period, particularly during the 1950s and 1980s, but beginning in 1987 the economy improved, and the 1990s saw the beginning of substantial economic growth. This period of growth became known as the Celtic Tiger. The Republic's real GDP grew by an average of 9.6% per annum between 1995 and 1999, in which year the Republic joined the Euro. In 2000, it was the 6th richest country in the world in terms of GDP per capita. Historian R.F. Foster argues the cause was a combination of a new sense of initiative and the entry of American corporations. He concludes the chief factors were low taxation, pro-business regulatory policies, and a young, tech-savvy workforce. For many multinationals, the decision to do business in Ireland was made easier still by generous incentives from the Industrial Development Authority. In addition, European Union membership was helpful, giving the country lucrative access to markets that it had previously reached only through the United Kingdom, and pumping huge subsidies and investment capital into the Irish economy. Modernization brought secularization in its wake. The traditionally high levels of religiosity have sharply declined. Foster points to 3 factors. First, Irish feminism, largely imported from America with liberal stances on contraception, abortion, and divorce, undermined the authority of bishops and priests. Second, the mishandling of the paedophile scandals humiliated the church, whose bishops seemed less concerned with the victims and more concerned with covering up for errant priests. Third, prosperity brought hedonism and materialism that undercut the ideals of saintly poverty. The financial crisis that began in 2008 dramatically ended this period of boom. GDP fell by 3% in 2008 and by 7.1% in 2009, the worst year since records began, although earnings by foreign-owned businesses continued to grow. 98, the state has since experienced deep recession, with unemployment, which doubled during 2009, remaining above 14% in 2012. Northern Ireland resulted from the division of United Kingdom by Government of Ireland Act 1920 and until 1972 was a self-governing jurisdiction within the United Kingdom with its own parliament and prime minister. Northern Ireland, as part of United Kingdom, was not neutral during the Second World War, and Belfast suffered 4 bombing raids in 1941. Conscription was not extended to Northern Ireland, and roughly an equal number volunteered from Northern Ireland as volunteered from the Republic of Ireland. Although Northern Ireland was largely spared the strife of the Civil War in the decades that followed partition, there were sporadic episodes of intercommunal violence. Nationalists, mainly Roman Catholic, wanted to unite Ireland as an independent republic, whereas Unionists, mainly Protestant, wanted Northern Ireland to remain in United Kingdom. Protestant and Catholic communities in Northern Ireland voted largely along sectarian lines, meaning that the government of Northern Ireland, elected by first past the post from 1929, was controlled by Ulster Unionist Party. Over time, minority Catholic community felt increasingly alienated, with further disaffection fueled by practices such as gerrymandering and discrimination in housing and employment. In late 1960s, nationalist grievances were aired publicly in mass civil rights protests, which often confronted by loyalist counter-protests. The government's reaction to confrontations seen as one-sided and heavy-handed in favor of Unionists. Law and order broke down as unrest and intercommunal violence increased. Northern Ireland government requested British Army to aid the police and protect Irish nationalist population. In 1969, paramilitary Provisional IRA, which favoured creation of a united Ireland, emerged from a split in the Irish Republican Army and began a campaign against what it called the British occupation of the 6 counties. Other groups, both the Unionist and Nationalist, participated in violence, and a period known as the Troubles began. More than 3,600 deaths resulted over the subsequent 3 decades of conflict. Owing to civil unrest during the Troubles, British government suspended Home Rule in 1972 and imposed direct rule. There were several unsuccessful attempts to end the Troubles politically, such as Sunningdale Agreement of 1973. In 1998, following a ceasefire by Provisional IRA and multi-party talks, the Good Friday Agreement concluded as a treaty between British and Irish governments, annexing the text agreed in the multi-party talks. The island is divided between Republic of Ireland, an independent state, and Northern Ireland, a constituent country of United Kingdom. They share an open border and both are part of the common travel area, and as a consequence, there is free movement of people, goods, services, and capital across the border. The Republic of Ireland is a member state of the European Union, while the United Kingdom is a former member state, having both acceded to its precursor entity, the European Economic Community, in 1973, but the UK left the European Union in 2020 after a referendum on EU membership was held in 2016, which resulted in 51.9% of UK voters choosing to leave the bloc. According to the 2024 Global Peace Index, Ireland is the second most peaceful country in the world.